everything.
It's everything. I'm everything.
Welcome to the Emajae Talks Everything podcast, where I talk politics, pop culture, and everything in between. I'm Emajae, and this week is the week that I talk about the show that has been all over social media. Everywhere I look, anytime I'm on IG or Twitter or wherever I'm at, I'm seeing people talk about this show. And I knew that I had to get in on it, and I want to talk about it on this week's episode. Last week, I did an episode, my very, very first episode. So if you haven't watched or listened, you need to save this video right now, save this pod. We'll go watch that one because we got into it in that one as well. And then come back over here. We'll be waiting for you. Okay, thank you. But last week, before I got to the part of my show where I talk about everything on my mind, I talked about everything that was in the news, which is essentially hot topics, things that are happening throughout the week that I want to talk about. This week, we're going to skip everything that's in the news because I am introducing a new segment that I will have every now and again, and it's called Everything That I'm Watching. And guess what it's about? Pretty self-explanatory. It's everything that I am watching. And so we're going to get into it because, to be honest, I have a lot to say about this show. Okay, and let me go ahead and get my notes, because you know I'm a girl that likes notes. And we got a lot that I need to make sure that I address. So the very first thing that I want to say before we really get into it, if you have not yet watched the show Forever, I encourage you to do that before watching this video, because I will be spoiling it. Okay, I do not want to recap episode per episode of what happened and went down. It was a lot. Okay, it was really a lot. And so the way I'm going to recap the episode is by exploring the major themes and messages that I got from each one of the characters. And I feel like that's just kind of the best way to go about it, because if you've watched, then you'll have enough context to understand where I'm going with it, instead of, episode by episode. We're not gonna do that over here, okay? So I don't wanna spoil it. If you haven't seen it, save this video, save this pod, go watch it. It's on Netflix, and then run this back, okay? So Forever, let's get into it. So at a high level, Forever follows the love story of Justin and Keisha. And essentially it's their first love, right? They're high school teenagers, and it follows their life and the challenges that they're having, both individually, but also the challenges they're having navigating their first love. And it's really a beautiful love story fundamentally, but I think what makes this show so great is it has so much nuance, so many subplots, so many supporting characters that really give us a lot to dig into. And so, like I said, the way I want to break this down is going character by character, and I'm actually going to start with like my very least favorite character. So let's get into it. Let's just get into it. My least favorite character of the entire show is Christian. Okay, let's just start with Christian, because I just want to get him out of the way. So for a little bit of context, and again, if you've watched the show, then you know, but Christian is Keisha's ex-boyfriend. He is the boyfriend who released what we will refer to as the tape, okay? And the lesson behind Christian's character for me is really the way we let people in our community who we admire for whatever reason, right? Within the context of this show, Christian was like the star athlete. He was the new Michael Jordan. He was the one who made it out of, wherever they're from, and he was gonna be the next big thing. And he released this tape while he was in a relationship with Keisha. The tape got around, and it essentially forced Keisha to leave the school that she was at, which she had a full scholarship to attend, go to a completely different school, which her mother could not afford. And it essentially ruined her entire reputation, her mental health, all of these things. But Keisha didn't tell anybody, right? And she kept her trauma from her ruined reputation to herself, and she carried that all on her own, which we'll get to. But ultimately, I didn't like Christian at all. Not only did I not like him because he released this tape without her consent, which is violent and violence, but I just did not appreciate the fact that I don't think he got it. So you guys remember the part where Keisha was working out and they were doing like the whole Nike training situation, right? And she was telling him, like, you don't understand that Asari is just not gonna do it. You can do all of these things. You can buy me flowers. You can do all of these things, but there were real life consequences behind your actions. And I just feel like the biggest takeaway from Christian's character, besides the fact that he just did not understand the weight of his actions, is how sometimes we will let the people in our communities, the people around us, use their talent, use their just whatever it is that we admire about them to get away with bad behavior. And I'm not gonna take it there because, as I've said in my previous video, I think that this is a topic that I will have to dig more into on its own. But what are we seeing? What major trial is going on as we speak, right? We know what major trial is going on as we speak. And the reoccurring theme in that trial is this person used their power, they used their celebrity, they used their admiration, and the community protected him because of who he was. And that was, I mean, we see it all of the time. So I thought that was really the role that Christian played. There was no accountability. Even when her mom found out about the tape, Keisha was still protecting him. And unfortunately, he did essentially get away with releasing the tape. I cannot stand that character. Every time he was on the screen, I was annoyed by him. I also thought that he was very manipulative in the way he was sending flowers, still inviting her to prom, showing up at her house. I mean, it was really, in my opinion, very violent behavior, if I'm being honest. And I didn't take his storyline. I didn't take that situation seriously. I didn't think that there was anything cool about the Christian character, and I did not like him. Now, he's an actor. Okay, so we're not holding it against whoever he is in real life, but within the show, he was by far my least favorite character. So I wanted to start with him and get him out of the way. Let's talk next about Keisha's mother. Now, I liked Keisha's mother. I had no major issues when it came to Keisha's mother. There were two major takeaways and messages that resonated with that character for me. And the first thing that I took away from Keisha's mother, whose name is Shelly Clark, was a mother's love. Oh my goodness, a mother's love. Keisha's mother was working night shifts. She was essentially a single mother trying to make it, trying to support the very expensive and demanding dreams of her daughter. And she was really doing it so that her daughter could live a life that she was never able to live and have for herself. And I think that's just so admirable. It shows the depths of a mother's love. It shows what mothers are willing to do for their children and to ensure that their children have a future that they wish that they could have had. And I just thought that was a beautiful story. I had so much respect for Keisha's mother. We would see scenes where, she's, writing out the bills, and, when Keisha was getting ready to go to prom, that's expensive. She was asking Keisha, what kind of training equipment she needed because Keisha ran track. And she was asking her, how much are those spikes that you need? You know what I mean? As she's sitting there calculating her bills, not wanting her daughter to worry. And that's just, honestly, that is fundamentally love, doing what you have to do no matter what for the people that you love and to support the people that you love. I had major, major respect for Keisha's mother. Now, where it gets a little bit tricky with Keisha's mother, and I took some notes, so I just want to make sure that I touch on it, but I wrote, the importance of Shelly Clark, Keisha's mother, for me also is the lesson of not placing the weight of your mistakes on your children. It was very evident throughout the entire series that Keisha's mother had Keisha young. She had her as a teenager herself. And because of that, she preached and preached, you know, don't have kids early. Don't be out here in the streets doing things that people in the streets might be doing. You know what I'm saying? And it was to the point where it facilitated an environment for Keisha where she felt like she couldn't go and talk to her mother when she did get into a tricky situation with the tape. And I think that was a very, very important lesson that I honestly wish that they would have kind of like zoned in a little bit. Is it zoning? Maybe it is. There's always a word that gets me, y'all. But I wish that we would have gotten a little bit more of that. And we see towards the end of the show where they have that sit down and Keisha finally reveals to her mom about the tape. And Keisha's mom mentions that she saw a therapist, and she mentions how she took her own experiences, her own fears, and essentially created this environment where Keisha did not feel comfortable enough to go to her with whatever. You know, Keisha felt like she had to be perfect so that she didn't disappoint her mother. And that's tough. And we're going to talk more about that from Keisha's point of view. From Keisha's point of view, but from Shelly's point of view, again, it just comes back to wanting to do what's best for your child, wanting to protect your child, but you also have to be careful that you don't place the weight of your mistakes and your lived experiences on your child so that they feel like there's no room for error. Because at the end of the day, these are children, right? And children make mistakes. And if you don't facilitate an environment where they feel like they can go to you about anything, then now you're putting them and you in a very tricky situation, right? But overall, I really, really appreciated Shelly's mothering. I appreciated her and her dynamic with Keisha overall. So we'll move on, because the next person I want to talk about, I think it's a little controversial of a character. Now, online, I have seen a lot of opinions about Dawn. Dawn Edwards is Justin's mother. So we just got done talking about Keisha's mama, okay? Now we have to talk about Justin's mother. And I've seen a lot of negative opinions about her mother, about his mother. Now, to be fair, I understand to a certain degree. She was annoying, okay? Like, we could just call it what it is. Justin's mama was annoying. She was doing a little too much sometimes. I know specifically there was a scene where they were in Martha's Vineyard. Shout out to Martha's Vineyard. I've personally never been. I do want to go, and oh my goodness, this show made it 10 times worse. But they were in Martha's Vineyard. At this point, Justin, he was, bummed out because him and Keisha were on a break. And she went into his room trying to connect with him. But she was so critical about his beats. And I'm just like, well, why would you choose this time to be critical of your son when he's obviously dejected from life? Like, I think she definitely missed some fundamental parenting 101 classes, but overall, I think that she is a great example of being a fierce protector of your child. She did not play about Justin, and though I do not have kids yet, I know that I will be very similar. I don't play about the people that I love. And I get the sense that she just doesn't play about her kids. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Yes, this is a Justin and Keisha love story, but at the end of the day, if you got a black mama who don't play about you, you can relate. And as children, sometimes you don't see the big picture. As children, sometimes you feel like your parents they're ruining things for you, or they're getting in your way, but they are the adults. And I think that she is such an important character for many, many reasons. And so, number one, I wrote that you won't make me not like her. I was a huge fan of her, even when she got on my nerves. She was a protective mother, sometimes overprotective, but we'll get to the balance and where we found the balance in the show with that. She's the only adult who protected Keisha upon finding out about the tape, right? Now, once Keisha's mom found out about the tape, okay, great. She stepped in, she did what she had to do. But I would have probably done the same thing if I was in Dawn's position and my son came to me and told me that he knew about this tape and that his girlfriend didn't know. Adults have to get involved to a certain degree. Nobody protected Keisha, and unfortunately, her son didn't understand the severity of Keisha not sharing that with an adult. And so she had to force his hand, and I would have done the same thing. And like she said, sometimes when you love someone, you have to do the tough thing, even if it's not what they want to do at that moment. If it's in their best interest, if it's a safety precaution for them mentally, physically, you have to do the tough thing. And she stepped in and she protected Keisha. And again, y'all will not make me not like this woman. I was a fan. Lesson. Two major lessons that I think we can and should take away from Dawn. The first, let's talk about at a high level, right? At a high level, Dawn really just wanted what was best for her son. The two lessons that we take away from Dawn is, how do we define what's best? Dawn's character in many ways was an example, a real life example of class conflict, right? So what we see Dawn, who has ties to an elite university, but she is raising a Black man. So she understands that no matter what she does, Justin and her other son, I think her other son's name was Jaden, she understands that regardless of how much money she has, regardless of, the institutions that she has access to, she is raising two Black men. And that's very reoccurring for her throughout. The fact that she just wants Justin to be with the Black girl, and the fact that she mentioned how she freaks out every time her son just wears a hoodie, right? She's very cognizant of her son's place in this world and the privileges that she has and that she wants to leverage and utilize to protect him. The problem is, as we also see throughout the show, it's not all that it is cracked up to be in a sense, right? So yes, you want your son to go to this quote unquote elite, well, not quote unquote, that is an elite university, right? You want him to go to this elite university, but is that truly what's best for your son? Or is that what you have created in your mind is best because of fill in the blank of all of these, reasons that we can go down? And to me, I think it brought up a great kind of counter between, PWIs and HBCUs. Justin mentions how he's tired of being in these PWIs, predominantly white institutions, or in his case, he was in predominantly white high schools. He talked at length throughout the entire season about what that kind of did to him and not necessarily feeling represented. When he went to Keisha's prom, he talked about how he enjoyed being around so many Black people, right? And he was not going to get that going to the school that his mom wanted him to go to. And it, to me, just brought up that theme of PWI versus HBCU. Keisha was very clear that she wanted to go to Howard. And pause. This was I just had to break it out. I just had to break out the Howard sweatshirt, because as someone who attended both a PWI, shout out to the Ring, and an HBCU, I understand weighing both. But the thing for me is I found and find value in attending both my PWI and my HBCU. And I think the class conversation with Dawn is trying to figure out, how can I leverage these resources that I've worked so hard to get for my family in a way to protect my son, with also trying to reconcile the fact that what if my son doesn't want any of this? And I think that is the ultimate challenge with Dawn the entire time, is she just thinks it's a home run. We have money now. We are in the nice neighborhoods. I was able to put you in these expensive schools. You have access that we did not have. Why aren't you happy? Why are you not okay? And that's tough. That's tough. If you are perhaps the first in your family to make money, or the first in your family to quote unquote make it, you have an idea of what success looks like for your children. And when your children seemingly don't see the value and see how that can be leveraged. In your mind, you're confused, but I think her story is really getting a sense of these elite institutions and paying all of this money. It doesn't necessarily equate to happiness just because you think it does, just because it's elite from your standpoint. Which takes me to my next lesson that we can get from Dawn, which is you cannot substitute your dreams you cannot substitute the dreams of your children for your dreams, right? It's kind of the reverse of the issue with Keisha's mom. Keisha was substituting her fears and placing the weight of her fears on Keisha, and Justin's mom was substituting Justin's dreams for her own. She wanted him to continue the legacy of going to Northwestern. He didn't want that. She wanted him to continue playing basketball. He didn't want that. So I think the similarities between their moms is substituting their own fears, Keisha's mom, or their own desires, Justin's mom, and putting that on their kids. Both out of protection, right? Both out of love, but there's a fine line sometimes between love, protecting your children, and taking it a step too far. And I think we see those similarities between both mothers, both amazing mothers, both very different backgrounds. Keisha's mom was struggling. Dawn's mom, could pay for anything, but we're still seeing kind of those underlying struggles with both of them. You will not make me not like Dawn. If you don't like Dawn, you need to let me know why. Comment, do whatever you have to do to explain, plead your case. I need receipts because at this point, I'm not understanding the hatred behind my girl. But let's move on. Let's move on and talk about Quincy. Now, Quincy is Keisha's father. And I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on him because honestly, he was an absent father and he was in the show for about 3 seconds, okay? He was not in there at all, really. And when we first find out about Quincy, Keisha introduces him as someone who's mostly away, and when he comes in, he disturbs the peace, and that's exactly what he did. I thought that the way he acted at Keisha's graduation or whatever party she had when he was like grilling Justin, I thought it was pretty ridiculous. It was very uncomfortable. I get it, as a father, you gotta size up the guy, your daughter brings home. I just felt like it was inappropriate the way he went about it, especially because he's mostly an absent father. With that being said, the one quick lesson that I will take away from him is, what did I write? Because I barely have anything. Let's see. He's the one who identified and kind of warned Keisha a little bit. Now, he was the one who was able to signal that Justin was lost. And it was kind of the point of the show where the series kind of shifted, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I do think it was value in him, explaining to his daughter, like, listen, Justin he's not fully in this relationship for the healthiest reasons. And I guess there's value in a father still being able to provide some type of advice, even if he's absent. I don't know. Like I said, honestly, what's his name? Quincy. Like I said, he was barely in the show. And so he's really over there with Christian as characters that I just don't really care for. He came, he went, and so we're going to move on and talk about probably my favorite character outside of the main characters, which is Eric Edwards. Eric Edwards is Justin's father. And I just really, really, really appreciated the value that he brought to this show. I talked a lot about Justin's mother and how his mother was sometimes too much. Sometimes she would smother Justin and just didn't know the line between protecting her son and smothering her son, right? But every single time she would go just a little bit too far, her husband, Eric, would step in, put lay down the law and let her know when she needed to back up. He always gave Justin amazing advice. The first piece of advice we heard him give the entire series was to communicate, right? The earlier part of the season when Justin, he snuck off and took a car to go see Keisha, if you know, you know. And he got his phone taken away. And his father was like, dog, why didn't you just say something? Why didn't you just talk? Why didn't you just communicate? It was simple advice. And honestly, when it happened, I was thinking to myself, well, Justin, if you told your mom or explained this to your mom and dad what you were trying to do, would they not have understood? Like, okay, maybe that was why you just didn't say anything. But when the dad was like, you could have just told us, I was like, yeah. But again, it goes back to, do your parents, or do you as parents facilitate an environment for your children where they feel like they can communicate and talk to you and do these things? I would argue that Dawn probably doesn't facilitate that kind of relationship with her son, which is why he didn't. And so I think his dad gave such amazing advice there. He also was like, if you would have told your mama that she was a black girl, that Keisha was a black girl, she would have let you go, because more than anything, she wants you with a black girl. I thought that was pretty funny. But again, just using his wisdom, and we see it throughout the entire show. When they were at Martha's Vineyard and Justin found out Keisha was on the island, his mom was, pretty much trying to withhold that information. But the dad was like, listen, dog, she's here. And you hiding out in your room, you not doing what you're supposed to do, that's not going to change the circumstance. The only way to it is through it. I just felt like his character on this show added so much value. And I don't really have a takeaway lesson. I just had more commentary about how refreshing it was to see a black father on the screen, not problematic, loving his wife, being present, offering value to his family. It is just a refreshing thing to see. And he was such a refreshing character. I appreciated him throughout the entire show, and he's honestly one of my favorite characters throughout. Now it's time to get to Keisha and Justin. That's what you're here for. That's what this is all about, really. So let's get into it. If I had to sum up the Keisha Justin situation, we'll just say situation, I would say that Keisha and Justin are two sides of the same coin. And that's really what this all comes down to. They are two sides of the same coin. Now, the first half of this amazing show, this amazing series, really is about their love story. This is really about their relationship. And I'm just gonna be the one to go ahead and say it because somebody gotta say it and put it on the record. Keisha was the weakest link, okay? My girl was the weakest link. In the first half of this season, Keisha was the weakest link. When I tell you Keisha got on my nerves, when I tell you Keisha got on my absolute nerves, she was the weakest link in the relationships. She was the weakest link in the first half. Now, is that controversial? I don't know. You tell me. You let me know in the comments. You let me know if you agree or disagree. But I was not feeling Keisha for them first few episodes, if I'm being real. Now, why? Well, Keisha was wishy-washy. 1 minute she was in, 1 minute she was out. 1 minute she wanted the relationship, the next minute she didn't want a relationship. And I understand her dilemma with the tape and the wanting to go to prom with Christian to keep up appearances. And I'm gonna give her grace, which we'll get into in just a second. However, Justin was the most stable in terms of the relationship. The only time I believe he blocked her was after the prom situation, I believe. Like when she was just like, listen, I'm gonna go to prom with this guy. Like, you're literally in a whole relationship with this man and you're gonna go to prom with somebody else. Again, I'm gonna give her a grace in 2 seconds, but right now I gotta get on my girl. Who wouldn't have an issue with that? Who wants to be in hiding with somebody that they're in a relationship with? Nobody. She was wishy-washy. And as someone who is a Taurus, I literally knew it was not gonna take long before I threw out that I was a Taurus. I should have made a bet at how many episodes it was gonna take before I mentioned that I was a Taurus, but it's very important to understand my perspective because Tauruses are earth signs, which means we are grounded. We don't like chaos. We don't like when you're here and then you're there and then you're like, we need consistency. We need someone who knows what they want, is clear about what they want, and they can be a safe, consistent force in our life. And Keisha was so triggering for me because I'm like, girl, you don't know what you want. And that's okay. You don't have to know what you want, but you should not be in a relationship. To be fair, she did warn Justin. She did tell Justin, you need to go get another Keisha. I got a lot going on. But at the same time, she could have also kept herself out of the relationship. She could have also just dealt with her stuff. I don't want to go too hard on her because if we're keeping it in context, she's young, you know, she's a young girl. She's in high school and she did have a lot going on, which is why, even though Keisha got on my nerves, I give her so much grace. And the people who are on this here internet, okay, while then talking bad about my girl Keisha, talking about she wasn't into Justin and all of this, my girl was into Justin, but Keisha was a teenager. She was a child dealing with real life adult issues and responsibilities. And she deserves a lot of grace for the way she was navigating this relationship in light of all that she had going on. She was dealing with the tape. She was dealing with her mental health and changing schools and the impact that had financially on her mother, who she saw struggling, right? And also holding all of that in. Oh my goodness, to be going through something so traumatic alone is tough. It's very tough. And she was also carrying the weight of her family's expectations. They called her Urkel, which I just thought is the cutest nickname because she was so smart, right? And she was supposed to be, again, the one who made it in her family, the one who went to Howard. Shout out to Howard. The one who went to Howard, the one who got the full ride, the one who made it out. And holding the weight of other people's expectations is a lot to deal with for anybody at any age. So just imagine that on top of everything else, right? And also not just carrying the weight of other people's expectations, but she was carrying the weight of her own expectations. She wanted to go to Howard and make it just as much as anybody else. And so the work and the effort and the time that it takes, she had a lot going on. And so, yes, she was wishy-washy. She was. But we do have to give her grace. And that is the beautiful thing about this show is it provides so much nuance, right? It's not just black or white. That's what makes this show amazing because even though it's a love story, it provides us a lot more to talk about than just two kids who fall in love. And the final point on Keisha, again, is people are saying she wasn't into Justin. That is not true. Okay, Keisha was just almost just as much in love with Justin as Justin was with Keisha. Now here is where there's a little bit of gap. Keisha did not have the privilege to dedicate her entire 100% effort, time, and energy into the relationship because she was trying to make it out. She was trying to survive. She was trying to deal with her real life issues that she had going on. So I think people are maybe misinterpreting, oh, she didn't even like him. She wasn't even into him. That girl, she loved Justin. I truly believe that she loved Justin, but she could not be as involved and tied up in the relationship as Justin. And we learn throughout the second part of the series why that is. Now, where the first part of the series focuses more on their love story, them falling in love, the ups and downs of high school, first love, romance, and all the things. The second part of Forever really dives into the theme of identity. And I just thought that was kind of brilliant because it really leverages the fact that these are high schoolers and usually in high school, I think that's the time where you first start being more aware of who you are, what you want out of life, because there's graduation and people are moving, you know, out of their hometowns, people that you've grown up with your entire life. It's really the first time in your life where you really have to start asking those questions about who you are. And so I thought it was beautiful that now they've kind of fallen into this romance, but it's not too far away where they're really having to get a sense of who they are as individuals, not who they are within the relationship. And on the second half of this show, we see that the weakest link here is Justin. pretty clearly, he's the weakest link, because what we know about Keisha is she's very clear on her goals, right? And I wrote this down when she said it. So when she was training and she was so good, and this trainer was like, oh, you should really go and you should really, you know, run track at X schools over here. And she's like, no, I want to go to Howard. And he's like, well, you know, you're wasting your talent. You should really go to these schools over here. Again, that kind of idea of class and what's better, and all of these themes are reoccurring throughout the entire show. But she says very clearly, after she tells him, no, I'm going to Howard, I know where I want to go, but thank you. She tells Christian, she says, I know what it looks like when dreams die, so I have to be clear. I know what dreams look like I know what it looks like when dreams die, so I have to be clear. That is a woman with a vision. That is a woman who knows what she wants. And I think that's just, I resonated with Keisha. When she said that, I resonated, because so many times people will try to tell you where you're going or what you should do when you already have a vision and you already know what that looks like. And I just appreciated that. And I also appreciated that she stood 10 toes on where she wanted to go. She wanted to go to Howard, and she knew the value that she knew the value that an HBCU gave. And she wasn't impressed by anything else because she knew what she wanted, right? But anyway, the point is, she was clear on who she was, where she was going, and what she wanted. Now, Justin, on the other hand, my boy was lost. He was lost. He was the weakest link on the second half of this series. And it's because it was about identity, and he did not know who he was outside of, quite frankly, who his mama, Dawn, wanted him to be. And I think, you know, Justin was using his relationship to escape really focusing on who he was. He was using his relationship to hide behind facing himself. And I didn't realize that until the second half of the series. And I thought it was kind of weird when it started to happen, because at the first half, I was team Justin. The first half, I'm like, he's just getting on my nerves. He needs to go ahead and protect his peace. He has all this going for him. And then it really started to click that, wait a minute, he's dealing with a lot, right? So what do we know about Justin? We know that he has challenges in the classroom, and they don't specifically, you know, put a name to it until near the end of the season. We find out that Justin has ADHD. Now, if you're online on social media like I am, people have put other names and labels on what he may or may not be, which I'm not gonna say because we don't know, right? I have theories, but we know for a fact that he has ADHD, right? So he's struggling in the classroom, which is another reason why he says he doesn't want to go to Northwestern, because he already was struggling in these, you know, more quote unquote elite schools. Now he's going to go to Northwestern that he barely got into, mostly got into because of money, privilege, contacts. How's he going to survive that? You know, so he's dealing with that. He's a Black kid who spent most of his life in white schools, which I can't relate to. I'm gonna be honest, I cannot relate to. I went to a very, very diverse high school when I went to my undergrad institution. It is a predominantly white institution. However, I was pretty much around everybody, if I'm being honest. If you know my immediate friend group, you know that our college nickname is United Nations. I am in a historically Black sorority. I, you know, of course, interacted with people of, you know, all races. So I don't relate to Justin in the sense of feeling like my identity is at issue because of that certain space. If anything, I felt like I leaned more into figuring out who I was as a Black woman when I was put in a predominantly white space. But as a young student who, you know, might not have my particular perspective on things, I can understand how that would be hard to navigate. And I know a lot of ways that it can show up in being hard to navigate for someone like Justin. And it was challenging to his identity. Another thing we saw was Justin, like Keisha, was dealing with the weight of his family's expectations. They wanted him to go to Northwestern. They wanted him to play basketball. They wanted these things for him. But that's not what Justin wanted. He was a very talented musician. He liked to make beats, and that's what made him happy. That's what brought him joy. And so instead of really digging into all of these underlining identity issues, it was just so much easier for him to lean into this relationship. And so whereas on the first half of the series, I'm team Justin because he seems like more of the stable force within the relationship, and Keisha is more just kind of everywhere. The second half, I was more team Keisha because Justin was starting to really wild out when it was time to graduate, and he was starting to show, you know, some characteristics that I did not appreciate towards the end when it really got time for him to figure out what he wanted to do, because he just simply did not know. And he didn't know because he was spending so much of his time wrapped up in Keisha, that he was not facing himself. And all of that to say, the lessons. There are so many lessons that we can take away from Keisha and Justin, and I'm probably not gonna get to all of them, but for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna hit on the top ones that resonated for me. Number one, people are entitled to grace in a relationship, i.e. Keisha. She is entitled to grace because even though she was wishy-washy, even though she triggered the Taurus in me, she had a lot going on. And just because you're in a relationship with someone else doesn't mean that your real life, individual problems, issues just stop. You know, this is real life. This is not a fairy tale. Real love, real relationships, real experiences, they're happening within the real world. And so people are entitled to grace when they are experiencing things like that in relationships. However, your partner is entitled to boundaries. Everybody has a line. Justin had a line. That's why he blocked her before they got back together, right? So it's kind of, again, two sides of the same coin to a certain extent. She's entitled to grace. He's entitled to boundaries. And I think that's kind of a reoccurring thing that we see across all relationships. People are dealing with their own things, and you're there for someone as much as you can be, but you have to have your own boundaries in place and say what you can and cannot put up with, what is and is not going to be acceptable. And I think their dynamic really showed kind of the struggle of making those choices, especially for people who might truly love each other. The second lesson that I took away from Keisha and Justin is a relationship can only be as strong and as healthy as the individuals that are within it. And I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about the way the show kind of ended, which is definitely leaving room for them to come back for a season 2, definitely leaving room to see, you know, how they kind of go off to their, you know, different corners of the world, get some experience and then come back. But it definitely goes to show that the strength of any partnership is really going to be based off of the strength of the individual. That's why personally, I feel like individual therapy, even in relationships, is amazing. Constantly working on yourself as an individual, say that 3 times fast, is super important, because at the end of the day, you bring your trauma into your relationships. You bring your skill set into your relationships. It doesn't go away. It only gets harder when you introduce other people into your life. And so the stronger you are, the healthier you are, the better your relationship is going to be. And it also works in the reverse. That is a major key. Timing is everything. That's a fundamental lesson that we all know, right? Timing is everything. I don't think that right now was the time for them, which is why I'm actually very happy with the way the show ended. I mean, I'm a girl who loves love, so I was kind of disappointed in the sense of I just wanted them to end that day and be like, okay, look, we're back together, we good, boo. I wanted that. But I also understood that this was, again, a real show in a lot of different ways. And I thought it was very mature of them to end it and say, listen, we're just gonna have to end it here. Justin was like, I need to figure myself out. I need to figure out who I am. And she realized that, she needs to go off. Wait, before I get too far, was anybody panicking when that man mentioned going to Howard with her? When Justin was like, I have a bright idea. Let me go to Howard with you. I was like, oh, no. We losing the plot, Justin. And that's really when she started to realize this kid has no idea where he wants to go, what he wants to do. That was real scary. I could not imagine being Keisha. If I was Keisha, I'd been like, no, you're not. You're not going to Howard with me. You gonna have to figure something else out, buddy. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, timing is everything. I really do like the way it ended because, again, it leaves room for them to come back with more experience, more context of life. And I always say, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. Everything doesn't happen right when you think, right when you want. But I truly do believe that your person always finds you. And maybe you meet them once and that's it. Maybe you meet them and you go your separate way and you come back. Like, who knows? But I feel like what's meant for you will never miss you. And it's kind of something that I live by. It's kind of one of my life mottos that I live by. And I'm kind of hoping that that's the story for them. And the last thing is, of course, love is powerful. We all know that. Love is powerful. Keisha was able to lean into her love for Justin and find support and encouragement to be honest with her mom about the tape and to, stop feeling shame for something that was done to her. The tape being released without her consent, she held a lot of shame for that. And she was protecting the person who did it to her. But she shouldn't have felt shame. And I think that being with Justin and feeling safe and stable with someone in the midst of all of her chaos, that's love. He was a safe space for her. And I appreciate that in Justin and what he had to offer to the relationship. Keisha, she offered support and encouragement in terms of the second half of the season and encouraging Justin to be honest with himself, because he was not being honest with himself either in what he wanted. And she really challenged him to get clear about what it is he wanted and to articulate that to his parents. And they all played their role. They both played their role in the relationship. And it all came back to just love, which is powerful. And it's why I love love. And it's why I love movies and shows which, always have some kind of underlying love theme to it, because there's just so much that we can learn from it. And that's really my recap of the show. I mean, there are so many different ways that I could explore and recap and talk about this show, but those are kind of some of the high level things that I got from it. And I would love to know more about what you all thought about the show. Did I say anything that you didn't agree with? Did I say anything that you kind of thought was off? You won't hurt my feelings. I promise. I promise you won't hurt my feelings. But I do want to know your thoughts on the show. Now, with that being said, I'm almost done. You can't get rid of me yet. You can't really go pause the video if you need something to drink, if you need some popcorn, if you need a snack, okay? Because I'm almost done, but I'm not quite done. That was everything that I'm watching, but I do want to get into just a little bit everything that's on my mind, okay? Because in watching Forever and seeing how much it popped off, it made me start thinking so much about the importance of telling Black stories. And not just Black stories, telling stories from all kinds of backgrounds, diverse backgrounds and perspectives. And besides being a great show with great writing, like Forever, I was thinking a lot about why was this show so successful? And I think it really comes down to the fact that you can tell that this was a Black story being told and written by Black people. There were so many different cultural nuances and nods to the culture that felt authentic. And I think it really resonated with an audience that is often forgotten about, i.e. Black people. And it made us perhaps even more invested. Even if Keisha and Justin isn't your story, you felt like they were your cousins, right? You felt like that was your homegirl. You felt a part of the story because the world that was built in that show felt like yours. And that's done because it felt authentic. And that can only happen when you have people telling the stories from their own perspective. So I just think it's important that we continue to do that. And it made me think a lot about, all of these different shows that are being canceled, Black shows that are being canceled left and right. We have a lot of Issa Rae shows that have been canceled. And Issa Rae even came out and spoke recently about how Hollywood is just getting rid of stories told, premiering black people, written by Black people, produced by Black people. And I think it's really problematic. It really is problematic, because what if Justin and Keisha were like Ben and Chloe, right? Like, I don't know, like the story would have been different and it would have played out differently if they were not Black. Why? Because the experiences shaped the story. Keisha's experiences as a Black girl played a part in why she showed up in that relationship the way she did. Justin's story as a Black guy played a part in why the story played out the way that it did. Those cultural nuances are very important to tell their story. And if we don't have those cultural nuances and we're not telling the stories, from the perspective of Black people, of the perspective of other people of color, then we're missing out on so many different complex discussions and conversations that need to be happening because they're essentially being whitewashed. And I hate to say it like that, but I mean, it's Emajae Talks Everything, and I have to talk everything and just get to it. At the end of the day, if you are not sharing Black people's stories, if you're not sharing stories of people of color, then what are you doing? You are watering down complex discussions that change and vary based off of these cultural nuances. And I think that's what's so beautiful about Forever is the culture behind it. Her going to get her hair braided, them being, in Martha's Vineyard, seeing Black people in that space. That's a story that needs to be told and explored, right? There's so many different aspects of this show that I just thought were beautiful and I personally resonated with. And I think a part of that was because it was a Black story. Keisha and Justin's story isn't my story, but I know a Keisha, I know a Justin, right? And I felt even more invested because I felt like their experience was authentic, and I could tell that their experience as Black people in the story was written by Black people. That's important. Now, and I hope y'all followed that. I hope y'all followed that. The key is let people tell their own stories. Stop whitewashing people's stories and stop canceling all of our shows. Okay. And the very, very last thing I want to say, because I just feel like this is the perfect place to kind of talk about it. When you give us our stories, right? Make sure they're of quality. Tyler Perry. Make sure when you give Black people their representation on the TV screens, that they are of quality. Because you have people like Tyler Perry who think that it's just good enough to give Black people Black shows, to give Black people Black movies, and that's gonna be enough, and it's not. We deserve quality, Tyler Perry. We deserve more. The creator and writer behind Forever is Mara Brock Akil. Now, I really hope that I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Mara Brock Akil. She is the creator of so many different shows. One show in particular being one of my favorite shows of all time, Girlfriends. Now, listen, I don't play about Girlfriends. I watch it once a year, every fall, like clockwork, okay? Don't play about my girls. Don't play. She is an incredible writer. She does such a good job of telling our stories from such an authentic place and doing it in a way that's nuanced and provides depth and quality. And I think it's important to bring up that we need more of her and a little less Tyler Perry, because Tyler Perry's argument that he has, kind of asserted in response to criticism over the past few years is, well, at least I'm telling the stories. At least Black people, are seeing themselves on TV and movies, and at least I'm doing that. But it's not an at least. You know, like we don't have to limit ourselves. Yes, we deserve our stories to be told, and we deserve them to be told with quality. We are nuanced beings. So let's add some depth, and let's add some quality, and let's make sure that the wigs aren't crooked, and let's make sure, cause why Tyler Perry be having the wigs like, you know what I'm saying? And you're a billionaire and you have your own studio, and we have seen you do better. And with shows like Forever, we see that it's possible to tell our stories in a much, much better way. So I think that it's twofold. We want our stories to be told. We need more representation on our TV screens, Black people, people of color, just people in general. And we deserve for when those stories are told, that they be told capturing the full essence of our stories, capturing the full essence of who we are, and it should be done with quality. So yes, you, Tyler Perry, who may never see this video, and that's cool. Okay, the energy is out there. You need to do better. We need more Forevers. We need more of that and less of whatever it is you be putting out, because it's not okay. Okay, but with that, I think that's everything on my mind. In closing, I really, really hope that you enjoy kind of the breakdown of Forever. I really love movies and TV shows because I feel like it's a great way to break down complex topics, nuanced discussions in a way that doesn't make people feel targeted, because you're talking about these things within the context of someone else, of people that you know, who don't really exist. You know, Keisha and Justin, they're in the TV show, right? So we don't feel personally attacked, but we can still, you know, leverage their stories to have these deeper conversations. And that's why I've always just enjoyed talking about TV shows and movies that I'm watching. That is everything that I'm watching. I am currently done talking. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have not liked the video, then you should. If you have not commented or shared the video, then you should. I will see you next time. Talk soon.
It's every